stories tonight, including a late-night ruling halting Texas's darn near total abortion ban and bounty hunter law. And within the hour, if all goes as planned, the Senate will vote to temporarily raise the debt limit, avoiding total economic catastrophe. But we begin the readout tonight with new developments from the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th insurrection. Late today, the committee issued subpoenas to 2 individuals and 1 organization involved in planning one of the rallies that precipitated the Capitol attack. Among the targets is Ali Alexander, a key organizer of the so-called Stop the Steal effort, who reportedly went into hiding after January 6th. Alexander alluded to the possibility of violence in the weeks leading up to the insurrection, and on the night before, he even led the crowd in a chant of victory or death. But most significant is that Alexander is the one, as you may recall, who implicated 3 sitting members of Congress in planning the events of that day.
I was the person who came up with the January 6th idea with Congressman Gosar, Congressman Mo Brooks, and then Congressman Andy Biggs.
Meanwhile, we're learning more and more about the insurrection, that the insurrection was really just the end game of a long-planned attempt to overthrow the duly elected president before he could be sworn in. A 400-page interim report from the Senate Judiciary Committee makes it clear, step by step, how Donald Trump planned to pressure and coerce the Justice Department into joining his effort to overturn the election. It reveals that were it not for a handful of DOJ officials, Trump's power grab could have ended democracy as we know it. Among other things, the report details a 3-hour meeting on January 3rd in which Trump threatened to replace acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen. According to Rosen, Trump opened that meeting by telling him that one thing we know is you aren't going to do anything to overturn the election. In Rosen's place, Trump wanted to install Jeffrey Clark, a lackey who would back his baseless claims of voter fraud. And if Clark's name sounds familiar, it's because he's the guy who pushed the DOJ to send letters to officials in Georgia and other states, asking them to void their election results. In other words, Trump wanted the top law enforcement agency in the country to lend its credibility to the big lie, a move that would have sparked a constitutional crisis or worse. That crisis was only averted because all of the other DOJ officials in the room made it clear that all of the assistant attorneys general would resign if Trump replaced Rosen with Clark. Even Trump's White House counsel, Pat Cipollone, threatened to resign, calling Trump's plan to issue Clark's letter a murder-suicide pact because of the chaos that it would unleash. All this played out behind closed doors just 3 days before January 6th, and it represents just a fraction of what the committee uncovered. It's further proof not only of Trump's personal disgrace and desperation to cling to power, but also his complete contempt for the democratic principles this country tells the world that it stands for. And that is not hyperbole. Trump compromised the independence of the DOJ. He defied the constitutional limits on executive power and subverted the electoral process. And don't take my word for it. Trump's own lawyer, John Eastman, put it in writing, providing a literal blueprint for how to pull off a coup in America. All of these abuses beg the question, who is going to hold Donald Trump accountable? Because as we speak, Trump is stonewalling legitimate inquiries into his conduct while perhaps planning to try it again. He's instructing his allies and former officials to defy the lawful subpoenas from the Select Committee. In fact, today marked the deadline for 4 of those subpoenaed aides to turn over documents ahead of their scheduled depositions next week. Joining me now, former Senator Claire McCaskill of Missouri, Glenn Kirshner, former federal prosecutor, and Kurt Bardella, advisor for the DCCC. Thank you all for being here. Glenn, I'm going right to the center of my screen here and talking to you because the stakes in those subpoenas next week seem to me to be pretty big. Because if those officials, those Trump officials, don't show up the way that they did during impeachment, if they just ignore those subpoenas, what needs to happen in order for us to essentially still have a rule of law in this country?
Well, there are 3 vehicles